Welcome everybody to the Sustainable Wedding Summit. We're so pleased that you can be here with us today. As some of you know, the Sustainable Wedding Alliance has been in my mind for quite some time. Officially, we founded in 2020 with our main launch happening just a few months ago in March. And I'm so excited that the response that we've received so far has just been so positive across all areas of the industry. The reason that we founded the Alliance is because we have experience working with couples, know the demand that's out there, and because we need to move towards being a more sustainable industry in line with the event sector and the hospitality sector and all other industries that are now starting to take part in what will be the new sustainable economy. The last year has been horrendous for the events industry, for the wedding industry. And we know now that we have the opportunity to build back better. So today we're going to hear from some amazing speakers. We're so privileged to have them joining us, talking about all things sustainability, from carbon offsetting and carbon capture to digital website footprints, to hearing from some of our amazing ambassadors. Kate will be talking about her experience of being sustainable business for over 8 years now, and also about ethical marketing and your supply chain. So without further ado, let's get going. I'd like to welcome Chris, our next speaker. Chris is the Head of Partnerships at our Future Forest company. Chris is going to talk to us today about carbon offsetting and carbon capture and how we can use their systems to help us, both in our businesses, but also our wedding couples that we work with. Over to you, Chris.
Brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. Been looking forward to it. So thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to share my screen. I'll say the ominous words. I hope you can see my screen. So yeah, as Michelle said, I'm Chris Eyre from the Future Forest company. I'm our head of partnerships. And in the strapline you heard there, or you saw there, might come across a little strong. And we've had some interesting feedback about the strapline. It's front and center on our website, but we really feel like there's no time for mincing words. As you'll know, we're in the midst of a climate crisis, so it's time for action. And it's really a doing word if you think about it, after all. And we're at a position where we all need to be doing everything that we can. And the fact that you guys are all here listening to this, organising this, shows that you're taking the first steps to be coming along on that journey of doing stuff, of having that positive action in your individual lives and your working life as well. So just to kind of give you a bit of an overview about what I'm going to take you through today. So we're going to kick things off with, I promise, only a couple of facts and figures on the climate crisis, because they're things that you're going to have seen in the press and newspapers for quite a while. And then I'm going to take you through the Future Forest company and the work that we're doing to fight climate change. Thirdly, just going to have a few simple steps for the wedding industry. So things that you can do to firstly understand the impact of your business and everything you're doing, and then how you can start to influence decision makers. And then finally, we'll kind of bring that all together and we'll look at how the work we're doing at the Future Forest company can help you, give you the tools to make a bit of an impact, or to make a big impact. So that will be looking at the ecological side of things, so tree planting and tree sponsorship in the UK, and also looking at carbon offsetting. So to kick things off, it's no secret. You can't open the newspaper or turn on the news without realising that we're in a bit of a bad spot. So there's kind of climate disasters happening at a faster rate across the globe, and there's news about the rising temperatures that we're in globally, and greenhouse gases increasing. And I wish I could say that was a lie, but it's all true. So you can see on the diagram on the left, you've got the top line, the black line, the kind of the business as usual line. And this is if global greenhouse gas emissions keep to increase year on year and year. This line will grow up and will pass really a point of no return. And then you're looking at the bottom two lines. So you've got the path to 1.5 degrees, which is what scientists predict is what we need to hit, and that involves removing, so it's reducing that number on the left-hand side, bringing down global CO2 emissions, removing the particles from the atmosphere. And that white bit at the bottom is where the Future Forest Company and other carbon removal companies come in. So you've got examples on the right-hand side. You've got nature-based technologies. So trees are a lovely bit of nature-based technology that we've got, and other nature-based processes. You've also got solar, wind, you've got direct carbon capture, direct air capture. It's just a way of how can we take out as much CO2 as we can from the atmosphere to help bring that line down. And on the right hand side, you've got a bit of a diagram which I hope simplifies how these global greenhouse gases are being caused by humans, by what we're doing. So you've got heating, air conditioning, you've got travel, flights, cars, you've got the industries that produce food, so farming industries. You've got things that you're plugging in. Every time you plug in your phone, it's using a bit of greenhouse gases. If your car is, or if your house is fueled by fossil fuels, and then you've got lots of industries where things are created. So that gives you kind of a broad idea of the issues and how these greenhouse gases are being released. And hopefully I can kind of take you through a bit of a way of how we can start to reduce that, improve the situation. And at Future Forest, everything we're doing is to fight against this environmental damage. And I'm going to try and take you through a bit of a video which just introduces one of our latest sites. And it'll give you a bit of an understanding of everything that we're doing. So it's only 2 minutes long, and that should buffer.
The UK has one of the lowest levels of woodland cover in Europe. UK woodland cover is around 13%, compared with the average of 38% for the EU as a whole and 31% worldwide. In 2020, we acquired 1,500 hectares of land in Scotland. Brisbane Mains is our third forest site. Here, we'll plant native birches, oaks, native shrubs, and some Scots pine. The result will be a diverse woodland capable of delivering a range of ecosystem services, like improved ecology and carbon removal, all helping to combat climate change. The new forest will also encourage an increase in biodiversity, a small but vital step towards reversing the catastrophic trend of habitat loss. We'll replant the majority of the site and leave space for rewilding where we can. Rewilding allows natural processes to be left to take their course without our intervention. Supporting local, rural communities is at the heart of what we do. We employ locals wherever possible. As well as planting trees, we're combining pioneering carbon removal technologies. We used enhanced weathering, the acceleration of naturally occurring rock mineralization processes, to lock away carbon for over 100,000 years. And we turn the forest waste into biochar, a very stable form of carbon that will persist in the soil for thousands of years. Combining enhanced weathering, biochar, and reforestation enables us to remove 10 times the amount of CO2 from the atmosphere than through tree planting alone. It's vital that we all achieve urgent reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Where emissions are unavoidable, trees and woodland ecosystems are essential for capturing those gases to fight climate change. The UK government recommends increasing woodland cover in the UK from 13% to 17% by 2050 to ensure the country achieves net zero carbon emissions. Our goal is to plant 50 million trees on 50,000 hectares ourselves by 2025. To find out more, visit www.thefutureforestcompany.com.
Great, so hopefully that'll give you a bit of an introduction to what we're doing. As they introduced there, we're doing tree planting at scale, and we want to plant 50 million trees by 2025. And the really important thing here is that we're doing reforestation properly. So we're always planting the right trees, typically native mixed deciduous woodland. So it's going to sequester a lot of carbon. It's going to capture a lot of carbon from the atmosphere as these trees grow. But also it's going to create the right ecosystems underneath. So we're making sure that we're not planting monocultures, and that whilst we're doing it at scale, we're doing it in the right way. So we're working with Nature Scot and Forestry Commission to make sure that every forest we plant, they're going to be having the right environmental impact from a carbon perspective, and also creating really rich ecosystems here in the UK. And here's a photo that you've got of Mull. So the Isle of Mull, so it's the Glen Aris estate, one of the sites that we've bought. And it just gives you an example of what we're starting with. So this, thousands of years ago, would have been rich native forests. But through farming and the degradation of the land, it's been turned from rich forest into essentially nothing, as it's really quite a barren landscape that's void of any really ecological benefits. We're going to be turning this into rich, diverse forest over the years. So we're going to be planting on Mull. Over 500,000 trees that can be planted on Mull. So this landscape is going to be transformed over the next couple of years, and then for the next 30, 40, 50 years as these trees grow, and we're really going to transform these landscapes. And at other sites, so we're looking at we've got 3 sites now in Scotland, we're looking at sites in Northern England and in Wales to really do the same. To start with these pockets of land, to bring ecosystems and ecological value to these pockets of land, and then try and expand, try and buy land next door, adjacent. So we're creating these wildlife corridors that, as I said, have got the carbon benefit, but also huge ecological benefits. And we're not doing it alone, luckily. So these are some Future Forest Instagram social media favorites. These are our Mangalitsa pigs. So these guys work with us on every single piece of land that we need to prepare, because as you saw from that photo before, it's really quite a barren landscape, and the nutrients are kind of quite locked into the soil. We need these guys to help us prepare the land. So we let these guys loose on our land once it's fenced up, and they work away, turning over the soil, preparing it in a really natural, holistic way, preparing the land for planting. They've got a lot of fans on social media. We've even got people wanting to sponsor them and take them home, and I can understand why. These cute woolly little pigs. And really importantly, for full transparency of all the trees that we plant, we take a photo of every single tree. And that's so that if someone wants to sponsor a tree, we've got the photo, we've got the geolocation, so you can even click and find out exactly where that tree is, and you can come and visit it if you sponsor a tree. And we've got the species, we've got who planted it, the date that planted it. So this removes any of that kind of ambiguity and grey area around tree planting. If someone sponsors a tree, they want to know exactly where that tree is, and they can come up and give it a hug when it's big enough. But yeah, if you squint in on the certificate, there is a little Volgard there with a sapling that we've planted. But we also fence up for deer purposes. So we'll have fences surrounding all of our sites with public access, but that's to keep the deer out, because the deer tend to like to nibble on little trees. So we're making sure that all of these trees survive. We've got a really strong survival rate of over 90% of our trees, and then we replant those that don't survive in the first 5 years. There's a really positive survival rate. But for us, it doesn't stop at tree planting. Tree planting is brilliant, but you'll have heard the counter arguments in the press that we can't just rely on tree planting. And they're right. Tree planting plays a part of something much bigger. And that's for us and for other projects globally. We need to be planting these trees, but we need to be having other positive action as well. And for us, for every piece of land that we acquire in the UK, we're looking to maximise the carbon impact. How can we remove as much carbon as we can from every single site that we acquire? So there's 3 other ways that we're doing that. So we've got the tree planting, we've also got biochar production. And biochar is essentially, the process of biochar is taking organic matter and then burning it in the absence of oxygen in a pyrolysis machine, like you can see. And this one is one of ours that's been delivered up to Mull. It's now in place on Mull. So it takes organic matter and burns it in the absence of oxygen, and essentially turns it into a really stable state of carbon. So it turns it into something like charcoal, which is a really stable state carbon. And then what we do is we scatter that on the land, on our forest land. So it locks up that carbon for over 1,000 years. And that also acts as a soil additive to supercharge our soils, and it helps with absorbing water. So in times of drought, there's going to be water that can help the trees grow sitting inside the carbon. And really importantly, it's the feedstock that we get. So we're working with, there's a huge amount of commercial forestry in the UK, and the byproduct of commercial forestry, whilst they'll take the main trunk for timber, there's a huge amount of waste wood that is left otherwise typically to rot, is left on the forest floor to rot. And within 10 to 15 years, these trees, they're not our trees, it's for commercial forestry up in Scotland, across the UK. This waste product just be returned, the carbon is left to rot, and it's returned to the carbon cycle. So our positive intervention, taking the carbon, taking this byproduct and putting it through the pyrolysis machine. So you're putting it into the oven here, turning it into this really secure, stable state of carbon. We're removing that carbon from the carbon cycle. We're preventing it being put back into the atmosphere, and we're turning it into something that really acts as a really strong soil additive to supercharge our forests. And as a company, we're looking to we're building a modular system so that we can have these production machines at each of our sites, and we're aiming to be sequestering around 200,000 tonnes of ECO2 from removing that from the carbon cycle each year by the end of 2022. So a huge amount of carbon being removed from the atmosphere. And next, enhanced weathering. So it might take you back to your geography GCSE. For some, it might be longer ago than others, but enhanced weathering is essentially it's the taking of basalt rock. Basalt is the bedrock on Mull, so we've got a lot of availability of basalt. There's even quarries on Mull where it's a waste product essentially. It's a product that's not got any use, so we're working closely with those suppliers. And essentially what we do, or what we're doing is taking basalt and crushing it into fine powder to maximize the surface area. And then what happens, we scatter that on the land. So again, scattering it on our own land, and the farmland where we're planting trees. And then when it rains, the carbon in the acid rain reacts with the surface of the basalt. And there's a mineralization process that takes place, which essentially locks in the carbon that would have flown through and kind of run off the land into the water systems, and then be returned to the carbon cycle. What we're doing is that's now being locked up on the surface area of the rock, maximizing it because the surface area is increased by turning it into a powder. And that is locked up, then estimating over 100,000 years that carbon is locked up. So it's something that's been happening in nature for forever. But we're essentially accelerating it. And that's the enhanced nature of this, is that we're accelerating it, we're breaking it up, we're actively doing it, we're exposing more of this basalt rock to the elements, and that we're going to be capturing a huge amount of carbon from the carbon cycle. And we're working with UK leading scientists on this to be really the first project globally that is implementing this at scale. So we're really excited about the potential of this approach, and kind of a permanence of 100,000 years is really quite something when it comes to carbon removal. And then the final piece of the puzzle is peatland. So the UK as a whole has peatland that contains 3.2 billion tonnes of ECO2. So there's a huge amount of ECO2 that's stored up in our peatlands, in our marshes up in Scotland, in the Lake District and other areas. 20 million tonnes of this are released annually just due to poor management, degradation. So this could be in the past where farmers were draining it to plant on the land, or people were planting trees thinking that was the right thing to do, planting trees on peatland. So all of this CO2 was being released at the same time as we're desperately planting trees to try and capture it. It was just a complete kind of imbalance. So there's been a lot of press around peatland and the poor management of peatland over the years, especially recently. So we're proactively, every site that we take on, we're working with the peatland code to understand how to best restore the peatland, and to stop, essentially, initially you stop the peatland, the carbon being released by the peatland, and then you help increase the carbon stores over time by kind of regaining the peatland health. And it also has wider ecosystem benefits because the peatland is an ecosystem in itself. So these are the 4 areas that we're developing on every single piece of land that we acquire in the UK. So you've got the tree planting, just doing that at scale, getting the right trees up, and you've got biochar, which is another way to lock up as much carbon as possible, and with the enhanced weathering as well. And then peatland is another powerful nature-based solution. And as I said, we're combining all of these to create healthy forests, and they all work together within our existing ecosystems. So that's enough about the kind of the sciencey stuff. Hopefully some of you are still awake and paying attention. But then kind of back to you guys. So as individuals and businesses, we know that we can all take positive steps to contribute to this fight. It's easy to be kind of dazzled and even kind of scared motionless and not be able to do anything, because there's sometimes a lot of overload of information. So I'm going to try and really break it down into 3 steps about what we can do as individuals and businesses to start taking these positive steps, to take kind of positive action. So firstly, it's really important to understand, whether it's you as a person or your business, to understand what is my life's impact right now. Me having my my daily routine, or my business as usual, what is the impact I'm having on the environment? So you can use an online calculator for this. I know Michelle is thinking, I don't want to give any secrets away. I know Michelle is thinking about developing a calculator that can be used for the wedding industry. But you've got to start looking at, okay, my travel, my day-to-day routine, what's the impact of this? And then it'll give you a really clear idea of, oh, wow, these are some areas where I've got to start improving on because there's a glaring footprint from specific activities. So that's step one, is really understand, educate yourself and educate your customers that you're working with. Number two, and this is really critical, it's decarbonisation, reducing your emissions, reducing your footprint. So once you've got that figure at the start, you'll get a bit of a rundown about the areas of your business, the area of your life, your everyday habits that are having a big impact. If you're flying across for half an hour meetings, you're flying across Europe, it's going to be quite glaring that those are the kind of things that you can start eliminating. An example, so for individuals cycling instead of using your car, renewable energy at home, if you've got a website, switching to a renewable, kind of a green server, really kind of simple steps that you can take. And then thirdly is offsetting. So offsetting is essentially taking that final ton figure. So you should measure your initial one, you should reduce that down to a ton figure, to a smaller ton figure. And then offsetting is the act of purchasing offsets or carbon credits that have already been removed from the atmosphere. So for example, the biochar that we're producing, we will be able to measure the amount of tons of carbon that is producing all the time. And it's something that's already taken place. We'll be able to guarantee that's already been removed from the atmosphere. And then you have to buy credits that essentially outweigh, so they offset the footprint that you've got remaining. You buy the corresponding credits, and that allows you to get down to zero if that's your aim. So this is the kind of the final piece of the puzzle. Once you've really removed all of your you've decarbonised as much as possible, and we can help you. Michelle can put you in touch with us, or there's loads of people out there that can help you go through this journey. And then when we're linking together Future Forest and yourselves, how can you get involved? So firstly, as I said, we're planting hundreds, thousands, millions of trees in the UK. And our tree sponsorship partners, we go from individual people who buy a tree from our website to businesses who are planting 25,000 trees a year. They're all planted in the UK, and as I said, we're recording the details of every tree that's sponsored, so that we can provide these to you as to your end customers, or we can link this into your business strategy however you see fit. For example, it could be that you had, if you're involved in this area of the business, using UK trees as an eco gift for every guest. So before they arrive, they can all get their email certificate of their tree, and they'll all be in the same area up in Scotland. Or including tree gifts within the wedding list. So you can even have a cluster of 100 trees that we planted together, and again they'll get the specific geolocation. So as those trees grow, as that cluster of trees grow, you'll be able to come back to the exact 3 by 3 meter square where your tree was planted. You can really kind of have that element of tangibility. And just a kind of a note, so beyond the trees themselves, so if you're sponsoring a tree, it may cover the cost of the sapling or the tree cell, but the funds that you're investing in for the tree sponsorship is helping a lot of the other work that we do. So the wider ecosystem regeneration on each site. So I've touched upon the kind of the holistic view that we have. So for example, up on Mull, we've got we're working with the RSPB to work with the continued regeneration of the seagulls. So we've got some nesting sites up on Mull, and we're working closely with the RSPB for this. We're also looking at helping the reintroduction of beavers up on Mull. So for every site, we're looking at how can we maximise the impact, and every tree that's sponsored goes towards that wider project. And we can provide loads of updates on these projects as they come to fruition. And then besides sponsorship, we're looking more at the offsetting side. So there's kind of really 3 steps, and it touches on the kind of the 3 steps I've already laid out. It's that measurement firstly, and then reduce, and then offset. So looking at measurement here, so I pulled off some stats from 77diamonds.com. The average UK wedding has got a carbon footprint of around 14.5 tons of ECO2. So as I've already said, we need to try and understand what's the impact, what part of our product goes into that 14.5 tons, and how can we help bring that down. That's really important, is to kind of measure business as usual, what's our footprint at the moment? And then how can we start to reduce that down? And as I said, this decarbonisation reduction is the most vital thing that we can do. So if you hear about big banks just throwing money at offsets without doing anything, that's really the kind of the big negative thing that we need to avoid. All of those companies need to measure and then bring it down as much as possible. I mean, everyone's going to have a footprint, because unless you sit at home and don't move, you're going to have a footprint. If your business is functioning, it's going to have a footprint of some kind, but you need to try and reduce that down wherever possible. And when you're talking about the wedding industry, I would lean on the positive side of things rather than focusing on the negative. Talk about the positive impact that a couple can have by choosing one choice rather than the other. And I guess the aim is to really prove to them that the perfect day, the big day, and a sustainable day, doesn't have to be a choice between one and the other. They can be one and the same. The right choices for them can be the green choices and can create a wonderful day. And kind of finally, it's that offset piece. As I said, once you've reduced, you're going to have a ton figure that you need to offset, and you'll have a final CO2 figure if you're working with a partner as a way of measuring your footprint. And then if you're involved in the kind of the direct relationship with the couples, or even in your own business, you should be looking at how can you start to offset? How can you work with partners to offset through sustainable means, sustainable projects like ours at the Future Forest Company to buy offsets that counter that remaining tonnage of the wedding. So, for example, 14.5 tons of the average footprint for a wedding would cost you £775 if you were to be making it carbon neutral through our biochar. But ideally, that 14.5 tons through decarbonisation could come down to 7 or 8 tons. So that 775 pounds could be down to 350 or 400 pounds. So to make a wedding carbon zero or climate neutral, it would hopefully cost 400, 500 pounds if you can really bring that decarbonisation process into play. So if you can start convincing the couples that these are the right decisions to make, and sustainability options can be actually a cost saving, because the credits at the end will cost you less, and often the options hopefully can be cost effective as well. There's really solid steps to get to carbon neutrality for weddings. And then just to kind of wrap things up, I'll leave you with a quote, and this quote is about zero waste. And from Anne-Marie Bonneau, she says, "We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly." And for the wedding industry, this rings true. There's no point in having 3 or 4 weddings a year which are amazingly sustainable and the rest have kind of a huge footprint. The aim is to start carrying out change bit by bit, as you guys are already doing, to make every single wedding, or as many weddings as possible, that little bit more sustainable. And each of you in your niche areas of the wedding industry, if you can each take these small steps, there'll be a larger change in the future. And I think just by being here, it's clear that you're already making the first step. So yeah, thank you all for listening. I hope it was insightful. And I will hand back to Michelle for any questions. And there's, if you want to follow us on social media, we've got at the Future Forest Company, or you can email me directly at chris@thefutureforestcompany.com. You can probably guess what our website is from that.
That was great. Thanks, Chris. That was really, really good. It's so, I just know that so many people are going to sit there and have so many light bulb moments. So I want to introduce our next speaker. Today joining us is Russ Avery, eco-entrepreneur and co-founder of Avery & Brown. Russ is joining us today to talk about ethical marketing, what it means and how it can help you and your sustainable business really get that competitive advantage. Russ, over to you.
Sure. So thanks a lot for having me today, Michelle, and it's great to be here and to be part of the summit. So my name's Russ Avery. I'm an eco-entrepreneur and a specialist marketer for sustainable businesses. I've been working in sustainability for 11 years now, the last 9 of which have been in marketing roles. And I currently head up Avery and Brown with my friend and business partner, Tim Brown. And we're a digital marketing and creative agency, which puts people and planet on par with profit. And we only work with ambitious, sustainability-focused businesses. So yeah, exciting times and happy to be here.
Great, thanks so much. It's so wonderful that, obviously working with businesses that have the same ethos as us, which is exactly why we invite you to be here today. Recently, you'll have seen the term ethical marketing has been bandied around as a bit of a buzzword. How would you define ethical marketing, and is there a difference between ethical and sustainable marketing?
Okay, great question to kick us off with. So let's start with a bit of background. So historically, the marketing and advertising industry has been the source of much criticism. And, that's completely fair. So rightly so, because ultimately it's an industry which, is responsible for persuading us to buy stuff we don't need, sometimes even stuff we don't really want, and to buy things that are not just bad for the environment, but that are actually often bad for our own health. And over the decades, this has led to a huge amount of distrust. So there's no doubt about it. Marketers and advertisers, on behalf of the businesses that they work for, have actually been a bit of a disaster for the planet and human health alike. But skip ahead to today, and happily things are changing. So I would say that we've reached a bit of a tipping point, and that a new age of conscious consumerism has started. So around the world, conscious consumers are now demanding that companies act more responsibly, and that they also market themselves more responsibly, or as you've said, Michelle, more ethically. So to answer your question, how would I define ethical marketing? Well, it's all about marketing with integrity. So it's about revolutionizing marketing from being a practice which was typically synonymous with obfuscation and deceit to one of authenticity, traceability, and transparency. And, to overlay this in the context of sustainability, and the reason we're here today talking at the Sustainable Wedding Summit, sustainable marketing to me is marketing which is socially and environmentally responsible. So it's marketing which guides businesses to define a broad mission that speaks to society rather than just the product or service at hand, and ultimately which has not only the customers but society's and the planet's long-term interests at heart. So to summarize, I don't think there is much of a difference between ethical and sustainable marketing. In my experience, the two terms are being used interchangeably, and ultimately what we're talking about is integrity, honesty, authenticity, and transparency. Sorry, that was probably a bit long, Michelle, but I think the context is really important there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as that's so important to us. And businesses, I think, are just really crying out for an understanding of how they can market themselves, on their sustainable journey. And, for us, and I know for you, it is all about being open and honest and being ethical and showing that integrity. So it's such a key, important part of it.
Absolutely.
So in a world that's becoming, we're all becoming more sustainable, how important is it that companies are communicating their sustainable objectives and values?
So, I guess the easy answer is I think it's absolutely vital. However, it absolutely has to be done in the right way, e.g. ethically, as we just spoke about in the previous answer. And the increase in conscious consumerism, which I mentioned earlier, means that people are getting much better now at being able to spot greenwash. So greenwash, as we probably all know, is when a brand makes either unsubstantiated or sometimes just completely false environmental related claims in their marketing and communications. And not all greenwash is easy to spot. Some actually requires a lot of digging and research to find out. But the point is that a lot of consumers are now quite clued up when it comes to the climate crisis and environmental issues. So yes, it's crucial that companies are communicating their sustainable objectives and values, but as long as they are doing so completely openly and honestly. So as we chatted about when we first caught up, Michelle, last week, it's far better for a brand to say that it's right at the start of its own sustainability journey that it isn't necessarily doing much yet, but that it has the intention to, instead of feeling pressurized into lying about how much they're doing. It's all about that honesty, and your clients and customers will really appreciate it, believe me. And we should also mention that those companies who are getting it right now increasingly have a competitive advantage in their respective markets and sectors. And it's estimated that new sustainable business models focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, could open up economic opportunities worth up to $12 trillion. So businesses really need to be asking themselves where they're headed, what the future holds, and ultimately if they want a piece of that pie.
I mean, let's be honest, who doesn't want a piece of that pie? It's so interesting to, hear that, it's across every single industry, and, weddings have sort of been left a little bit behind. I think, with corporate events and live events, even the festival industry, they're so much further forward with this thinking. And, it's really important, I think, that the wedding industry start to catch up to that and get a bigger piece of that pie.
Absolutely. And you know what? It might feel like the wedding sector, the wedding industry is further behind than others, which might be true. But obviously, the fact that we're here today talking about this, and there's the Sustainable Wedding Alliance and the summit today, it's actually going to be much further ahead than other sectors. And you've got to start somewhere. So it's just really great that this is happening, and that there's another sector which is trying to drive the sustainable agenda.
Right. So social media, we know, is such an important part of marketing in the world we live in today. What's the best way for our companies to stand out from the crowd?
Wow. Okay. That's another great question, Michelle. I guess my first tip would always be to not spread yourself too thinly across all the different social channels. And I've been as guilty as anyone else of that in the past, even as a marketer and an agency owner. But as small business owners in particular, I think we can feel enormous pressure to be on all the channels, can't we? You can probably resonate with that as well, Michelle. And there are so many channels now: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and then Clubhouse joined this year. And the list goes on. So we really all just need to sometimes take a step back and go back to marketing basics. E.g., where does our target audience actually hang out? So, for example, for us here at Avery and Brown, it's LinkedIn, first and foremost, like all day, every day. And in the past 8 months since we founded the business, it's LinkedIn is literally where 86% of all our leads and clients come from. So when we spend more time focusing on LinkedIn, we do see a direct return on that time investment in the form of more inbound inquiries. And of course, don't forget that we don't always need to think in terms of like qualified leads, because it could be PR opportunities, like being asked to speak on a podcast or events like this one, which is ultimately how you found me, Michelle, which could be really great brand awareness for your business. So remember to look at the data, because if you can determine that most of your engagement, leads, and opportunities come from one social media channel in particular, then go all in on that channel and try not to feel guilty or stressed about having less of a presence, or perhaps even no presence at all on some of the other channels. This one might be an obvious tip, but the other thing you can do to help yourself is actually ask your existing customers for their help. So ask them if they wouldn't mind answering a few questions for you about which channels they hang out on most, what sort of content they like to see from brands like yours, what resonates with them, and ultimately, what was it that made them buy from you in the first place? That is such an easy and free, which is always music to the ears of any small business owners, thing to do, but it could be hugely valuable to the growth of your business. And my final tip for this question is showing up on video. So video remains one of the most engaging forms of content that there is, and people absolutely love it when people, especially founders and business owners, show up authentically on video. And the reason for that is so simple. We love seeing the humans behind a brand. We love seeing personality. And especially if you're a small business owner and you are your business, which is going to be the case for a lot of us. It's certainly true for Tim and I. And we recently spoke about needing to get back on it with the video, because we see the great results when it happens. So showing up on video in your social channels could honestly be one of the best things you could do in your social media marketing efforts. It's much easier to hide behind words in typed out text-based posts, but very few of us are good actors, which means when we do show up on video, we're showing our target audience the real us. Getting over your fear of being on camera, watching yourself and hearing your own voice is something that most of us absolutely hate, me included. So you just have to get over it. But when I did get over it and didn't strive for perfection, because what is that anyway? You're always going to miss that mark if that's what you're aiming for. I began to start seeing tangible results almost coming through straight away. So I honestly can't recommend that enough to anyone tuning in today.
Yeah, you're so right. From our perspective on our launch day, we went out and we did a video, and I think it was the highest performing LinkedIn post that I have ever seen from my side of things, and even working with clients. So I definitely think that getting over that fear of putting yourself on screen is so important. And I personally have seen the results, and obviously from your perspective working with clients, they see their results as well. So totally recommend it, guys. Get over the fear. Just do a private video. It doesn't have to be a live video. You can pre-record it. Just do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Often.
Pre-record all the way. And the other thing is that there is no barrier to entry in terms of tech and stuff these days, because let's face it, most of us have probably all got a smartphone, so we're carrying around a really good camera in our pocket, and then all you really need is good natural light, and then if you want to take things to the next level, perhaps a mic and a tripod, and those three things don't need to cost you much money at all, and then you can just get cracking, and you'll just get better with practice.
Great. So our next question: what would you say to companies who are unsure about marketing and indeed running their whole business in a more ethical way?
Okay, so the good news is that I can give a much shorter answer to this question. So the data is there to show that consumers increasingly care about businesses which are operating ethically and sustainably. And indeed, the conversation is actually already starting to shift towards sustainable business no longer actually being enough, and that businesses should focus on being regenerative, which is something that Tim and I are trying to do here at Avery and Brown. And the idea behind it is that a sustainable business implies one which can carry on operating as it is and do less harm or no harm, whereas a regenerative business is one which gives back far more to society and the planet than what it takes from them. So in other words, the planet is a better place because that business exists. And that's where things are going to get really exciting for me, because it's about how a business truly can be a force for good. So I guess I would just say that operating and indeed marketing your business in an ethical, responsible, sustainable, or now even regenerative way is just something you need to do. Your customers want it. There's data to back that up. The planet needs it. And that's only going to get more and more the case with every passing year. And because profits are still important to all of us as for-profit businesses, you could even be more profitable as a result. And I've got another fact on that later. So I really do see it as being a win-win scenario for you, your business, people, and planet. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we recently launched a survey to ask couples that are planning their wedding or have recently got married about how important sustainability was to them. And I'll be sharing the results later today, but it's absolutely amazing to hear that, more than 50% of them, it's at the top of their list these days. And, I think that suppliers are maybe lagging behind in the understanding that actually where consumer demand has moved on, particularly in the last year, with the shift that everybody has seen, in their personal lives and the experiences that people have had.
Yeah, 100%. And we will, everything's like a positive driver at the moment, which is really encouraging. So the climate crisis continues to rage on. People are taking it more and more seriously. People are really waking up to the fact that this is real, this is happening now. And as more millennials and Gen Z enter the job market, not enter the job market, us millennials already are, but as they reach more senior positions in the companies they work for, or maybe start their own businesses, we're starting to see a real snowball effect in the in the sustainable business movement, which is really encouraging. So I think now really is the time, if you're not currently taking it seriously, to get on board, but not to jump on the bandwagon, of course, to do it because you really want to do it and that you see the benefits in it. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Two things. The bandwagon, we're not going to talk about that. But, actually what you say there about millennials and Generation X, like, I would absolutely love to have a chat with you more in detail about that, because I think that's something that businesses really don't know the difference between the different generations and how they should be marketing. And obviously, as we're seeing it, the younger generations coming through now are so much more aware of not just in the environmental issues that we face and the climate crisis, but also the social and economic issues that we're facing as well. So we will pause on that and definitely come back to that another time.
Sounds good.
So the last question I have for you is, obviously, with many businesses more becoming sustainable, it's both an investment in time and money. In your experience, what would you say that sustainable marketing can help them to improve their profitability of a business?
Yes, definitely. So it might not happen immediately, but in my experience and that of the clients I've worked with over the years, you should definitely see a return on investment of any money that you spend on becoming a more sustainable business. I mentioned earlier about the economic opportunities presented by a new green economy, which centers around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, here's a quick fact about certified B corporations. And for those of you who might not know, in their own words, certified B Corps are a new kind of business which balance purpose and profit, and such businesses are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on their workers, customers, suppliers, community, and the environment. So they really are like at the pinnacle of sustainable business. Well, in the UK, B Corp certified businesses grew 28 times faster than the national economic growth rate of 0.5% in 2018. And that's from the Office for National Statistics. And I just find that mind-blowing, because we're not talking about they do a little bit better. If we want to talk about profitability, which is obviously a very important part of the conversation, not just for us as the small business owners ourselves, but for bigger businesses and investors, that is something that we really can't ignore. So it's definitely food for thought. We mentioned the kind of $12 trillion figure earlier about being the value of a new green economy. And we've now got proof that sustainable businesses are not just growing faster and being more profitable, but considerably so. And that fact was from 2018, and we're now suddenly in 2021 already. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the next couple of years hold. And for B Corps alone, there are so many people applying for their B Corp certification now that there's a really long waiting list to get approved, which is both frustrating on the one hand, but really good news on the other hand, because it shows how many businesses are going through that certification process. So definitely food for thought, and definitely something to take seriously.
That's great. Thanks so much, Russ. It's so great to hear from you, and thank you for giving us your insights into ethical marketing. So all that remains for me to say is jump over to our Q&A. As with all of our speakers, they'll be joining us live. Let us know your questions. They'll be here for a short time yet to answer them, and we'll see you for the next session. Next up, we have Vanita Greenwood joining us, co-founder of Whole Grain Digital. Vanita's going to talk to us about our digital footprint, and in particular, a website's carbon footprint. She's going to share with us her insights into the research that they've been doing, her amazing website calculator, and everything that we can do to make our businesses reduce their carbon footprint. Vanita, over to you.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me at the Sustainable Wedding Summit. I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to sort of give you guys an introduction of how sustainability matters in my industry and how we can bring that benefit to your industry as well. I'm going to just share my screen so that I can do a presentation. It will go on for about 15-20 minutes. I'm trying to keep it short, but I'll try to do it in 15 minutes, and I'd love to have some questions from you. I'll just share my screen now. So I'm going to talk to you about the sustainable web design at this summit today and how you can make the websites better for the environment. So at this stage, you're thinking it's a very strange topic. Sustainability has nothing to do with the internet or the website emissions, whereas websites feel like a very inert, they don't have any physical impact, or they don't really exist. So how can they impact the environment? A simple answer is that they use a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, and whole of the internet. When you add it all up globally, and you work out the carbon emissions, their annual emissions are roughly the same as that of Germany. That is the 7th largest polluter in the world. And it's pre-pandemic, if you look at it, has got the same emissions as that of the global aviation industry, which if you think about the global emissions by the aviation industry, you'll always think, well, they need to go towards sustainability. And same applies for the internet. We need to take internet towards a sustainable, stable future. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is how this comes about. Where are the places where this electricity is being used? One is data centers, where all of the processing is happening, thinking is happening. The transmission networks, where a lot of information is being transmitted from your device all the way to the transmission center and back. This also depends on the quantity of information that you're transferring. And the end user devices, that's billions of devices across the world that are connected to the internet and trying to download the information and upload the information, browse your websites and so on. So these are the 3 places where we can actually save energy. One, by making careful decisions about how you load the server, how much information you load on your website. The next is reducing the amount of data transfer and therefore having your hosting provider closer to you. So for example, hosting your website in London or Amsterdam, so that it's based in the EU. And the last thing is reducing the energy that your device is using. So what can we do? So how can we make a difference? Think about user journeys. It's a buzzword, everybody uses it, but you don't have to be technically competent or be a designer or a developer to make a good user journey. It's all about common sense. For example, on this website, you have got a shopping basket that you can click into anytime and you don't lose the page and go away on another page and come back. Whereas it just slides out from the side and gives you an information of what you need to see. And it gives you information at your convenience, which is also very important. The more number of pages you have to load to get to your information, that means the more data has been consumed, more electricity has been consumed. So you want to really reduce that amount of information that is being transferred back and forth. So that's why we say streamline the user journeys so that you get from A to B quickly and efficiently. The next thing to do is to use low resolution images or less images or no images at all. In the wedding industry, it's really hard to explain something, the emotive feeling behind what was going on without an image. So it might be a bit harder, but you may have seen various vectors and beautiful illustrations on some websites that give you the same level of emotions because of the illustrations produced. So it might be worth thinking of SVGs and using CSS to produce those images, especially the vector images. Also think of the smallest size of your photographs. How small photograph can you get away with? I've got an example of how you can reduce the size of the photos without losing the impact of them. So this is a full image. It is 1.2 megabytes, which is way more than a size of a website. A web page should be no more than, say, 300 kilobytes or so that people can load it quickly. So this one is 1280 by 800 pixels, and it might take over the entire screen of your website. So it might be a big image in your background. What you could do is half this image. So if that image from 1280 by 800 goes down to 840 by 400, you have reduced the amount by 70%. So you've reduced it to 360 kilobytes, which is quite a big difference from 1.2 megabytes. Now, the next thing you can do is change the depth of field. The shallow depth of field is quite commonly used in the wedding industry and also creates a really beautiful emotive effect. But just by blurring the images on its sides, you can see you can bring the middle forward, the depth of field, and you've reduced the image again to 192 kilobytes, which is again 47% smaller than the image before. Further on, what you could do is you've blurred the image, you've made it smaller. You could make it even lighter by using monochrome effect, where you could use, it doesn't just have to be black and white, it can be any colors. You could create a really cool effect by having pinks and yellows and oranges to just make the image have a monochrome effect. So you're using less amount of color, because more color means more energy. So you're sort of taking every step you can to reduce the number of images, but also the images that exist are much lower in terms of their resolution and size. So the next thing to do is to compress your image. One second, I'm just going to try to get rid of this. There you are. One thing you could do is also change the type of image from JPEG to WebP. Your website might have a plugin or some form of system that might reduce might compress the image, but also may change the format of the image. And WebP or AVIF are the best ones that you can use so that your image reduces even further. And as you can see, it's gone from 1.2 megabytes down to 67 KB. Now you can use 5 images and you'll still be within the budget of the website that you want to try to create. Budget in terms of the number of images and the size of the page. Let's say, yeah. So for example, when we were designing Network Rail website, we were talking to them about how many images to use, why they're using them thoughtfully, using them carefully. And this was one of the problems we had that we were talking to them about, is understanding why you're using the image. And if you have more than one slide in your image, you're loading 3 images. It's something that they could so easily do without. It's something that we would love to converse with them again. Is reducing the number of images by not introducing carousels. Carousels just restrict the amount of information from one page to another, one slide to another. And the way you could change this is have all of the text on the left, make a smaller image with white space around on the right, and therefore make it visually more interesting as well. And perhaps you could put 3 messages on the left then, instead of having 3 separate slides. So this is one of the ways you can reduce the carbon emissions. The other thing you might be using is videos on your site. The first and foremost, avoid autoplay, because autoplay is like using somebody's bandwidth without their permission. So when somebody loads your website and your video starts autoplaying, they haven't actually opted in. They've just started using their bandwidth, and the amount of information on their phone starting to use all of this energy, electricity, without actually understanding, is this video actually useful for this person? The other thing you can do is compress the video files. You can stream it at lower definition as well. There is always an SD option instead of HD option, which is a standard definition instead of a high definition. And the last really clever thing you can do is try to communicate what you want to communicate in the least amount of time. So if you made a very high impact video, which was much shorter, it'll have to be played lesser amount of time. So that's another way of reducing your carbon emissions. In terms of colors, look at OLED screens as millions of little light bulbs on your screen. So all of the latest technology, like the mobile phones, your Mac computer, all of them have OLED screens. And for example, a white screen is, think of it as all of the bulbs are on the page. So when you're looking at your computer, all of the light bulbs are on if it's white. All of the light bulbs are off if it's no energy, if it's black. So it's using no energy. And then you have everything in between, like gray, you've got a low energy, blue is very high energy, higher than green and red. So you're thinking of the colors, also thinking of the energy those colors use. It is a difficult thing that white is of highest energy and white is a color of the wedding industry. It's worth thinking of off-whites and warmer tones of white to bring that white a bit down. That's always useful. So there's some low energy colors that you can use, like we've used black here, but also you can use a toggle dark mode. Here we have a dark background, and then when you click on toggle dark, which allows better accessibility and readability, you can just toggle it and make it light. So that is another option that you can use. Of course, you can change the contrasts and decrease the font size and so on, which is more accessibility controls. Tracking. Tracking is something that most websites have in some form or another. For example, Google Analytics, to find out who's visited your website, not in person, but aggregated data, like did they come from the UK, did they come from the US, and so on. So thinking about tracking, think of privacy first. When you actually load tracking scripts on somebody's phone, you are asking for, you're getting information about them, you're harvesting information. All of this information gets stored on some data center. All of this is using energy. So it's worth thinking about, how much is this data worth to you? Is it worth the carbon emissions it's creating? Is it really worth having that data? Is it really important to know what's going on? And are you going to do anything with that data? So privacy first approach means that you're asking less questions and avoiding those ghastly cookie banners on your website, which nobody likes anyway. You can use other options such as plausible and with cabin, and Google Analytics has a minimal version, so you could use that as well. So think about how you're asking for the information, but also what information you're asking for, and do you need it? The next thing to think about is when you're designing or you're creating a web product, how would a person with the lowest denominator phone receive your information? For example, if you have an iPhone latest number, probably 11, and you have a swanky 27-inch Mac, how you're streaming your information with the 5G network is just not the same as somebody in an unprivileged, from the unprivileged background, using a more basic phone, may not see the same information in the same way. They also may not have got the same bandwidth and may not have topped up their phone to have so much information being streamed. So it's worth thinking of the concept of less is more. So Alex Russell, who's an engineer at Google, talks about 0.5 megabyte is a decent hard limit. Don't go beyond 0.5 megabyte because you'd be hampering the user experience of somebody coming to your website. For example, he talks about this Motorola E7 phone, which is the most common phone used currently across the world. And although it looks pretty swanky, it actually isn't. The technology behind it is pretty basic, which means that if somebody's looking at your website on this phone versus on an iPhone, they're not getting the same user experience. So it's worth thinking about how the lesser privileged would look at your website. The other thing to do is host your website on a green renewable hosting. There's the Green Web Foundation, where you can go and find loads of hosting companies that are green and certified to be using renewable energy. Sometimes it's quite scary to ask these questions, but just drop a line to your current hosting company, or even if you're using something like Squarespace or Wix, drop them a line and ask them, is the energy they are using green? Is it renewable? Have they got some commitments in place? And if they don't, that's up to you then to go in, do your research and find how you could move the website to somewhere are more sustainably hosted. So that's one of the things that you can do quickly and easily. We created a tool called Website Carbon. So when you put in it's a free tool. When you go in and put in your web address and click calculate, it calculates the carbon impact of your website on the planet. And it tells you how much energy you're using, what are the quick actions you can take, and it puts it in our database where we can then give you anonymized results in the sense of how many of the websites tested are actually, reduced their carbon emissions when they came and tested again. So it's really useful for all of us as well to learn from the tool. I know a lot of people are going to go and check right now. The next thing to do is to read the Sustainable Web Design book. It's written by my husband, Tom Greenwood, and it's got loads of tools and techniques and design ideas on how you can make your website more sustainable, but also your web products. We also launched with Business Declares a digital declutter toolkit. A digital declutter toolkit is to reduce the amount of emissions from your emails, from your just the digital clutter we have in our lives. So it might be worth going to wholegraindigital.com/digital declutter and finding out what your current actions can be. I hope I've left you with some food for thought, and I look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to contact me. I also look forward to questions.
That was great, Vanita. Thanks so much. I just have one question, which I think everybody watching would love to know. If there was one thing that you would recommend that businesses can do right now to reduce their footprint, what would it be?
Switch to a renewable green hosting plan or a platform that is hosted on green energy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So next up we have Abina joining us. She is the Managing Director of Legacy Events. Abina's going to be talking to us about supply chain and making sure that your supply chain is as sustainable and as ethical as you are. Over to you.
Hello, lovely to be joining you today. My name is Abina Poku-Awura and I'm the Managing Director of Legacy. I'm here to talk to you for the next 20 minutes or so about how to create a sustainable supply chain for the weddings that you are involved with. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Before we get into this, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about me, let you know why I feel I'm qualified to talk on the subject of sustainable events and sustainable weddings in particular. So I'm actually a chartered scientist by background. I actually trained as an astrophysicist back in the day. And the reason that's relevant is I spent a lot of time learning about Earth systems, the environment, and really just seeing the damage that we've been doing to our environment over the last few decades. I also really love events, and so I set up a sustainable events agency called Legacy back in 2016 to really help anyone involved in organising any kind of event to think about sustainability and to think about how they can reduce the environmental impact of their event so their event was a really positive experience without any of the negative effects. So we're now a small team, we're based in Oxford, and we help all kinds of businesses to become more sustainable when they're running their events. Our mission really is to help organisations plan and deliver sustainable events that create positive change in the world. And so we try and make sure that sustainability is a thread running through absolutely everything that we do. And we really want to bring this to the wedding industry as well, so that weddings, like I said, can be really joyous, positive experiences without the negative impacts. So today we're going to talk about weddings and supply chains and making weddings more sustainable. So we should probably start by asking, what exactly is a sustainable wedding? We hear a lot about it in the press, and so let's define what it is. There isn't really one definition I can give you, especially not an easy one that's straightforward to remember, but put as simply as I can, a sustainable wedding is one that considers the carbon footprint and its environmental impact. So considering your carbon footprint and your environmental impact in the decisions that you make when you're planning a wedding. To make it easier to conceive of what a sustainable wedding isn't, I wanted to bust some myths about sustainable weddings. And probably the most prevalent myth is that a sustainable wedding looks like this. It's held in a barn, a rustic barn somewhere, usually wooden structured. It usually involves people dressed in tweed when people think of sustainable weddings, and there's a lot of greenery around. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of wedding, and lots of people like them and they're wonderful, but that's not necessarily what a sustainable wedding is. You can hold a sustainable wedding in the middle of a city centre as well as in the middle of nowhere. It's just a wedding where you've thought about issues like waste, like the energy that you're using, like the community that you're serving, like the food and drink that you serve. And it's possible to do that anywhere and for any kind of wedding. It doesn't have to be held in a rustic barn or have everything made of wood to be considered sustainable. Another myth about sustainable weddings is that there are a lot of hassle, and I do have some sympathy with this point of view, because to think sustainably about an event, you do have to change your mindset a little bit from where you are at the moment. So if you are used to running your weddings and organising your weddings in a certain kind of way, yes, you will have to change that, but that doesn't necessarily have to be more hassle. Sustainable weddings are a real opportunity to be quite creative in what you're doing and to bring different ideas to the table. And for us and our team, we love that. We think it's fun to think of new ways to run an event that is so traditional. So I'd like to bust this myth by saying, yes, they involve a change of mindset, sustainable weddings, but no, they are absolutely not more hassle. And the final myth I want to bust is that sustainable weddings are expensive. And I think people think that sustainability in everything is more expensive. And this myth really baffles me, because the whole point about sustainability is that you're thinking about using resources more wisely, more efficiently, using less of everything if you can, and reusing where you can. So there's no reason really why your wedding should be more expensive. The idea should be about reducing costs to be more efficient. Obviously, if this is the kind of look you're going to, this will cost money, but it's not inherently true that sustainable weddings are more expensive. And hopefully over the next few slides, you'll see that. Having said that, of course, I do want to acknowledge the devastating impacts that COVID has had on the wedding industry over the last year and a half. So this slide is from January 2021, and you can see that as a result of COVID, most of the world's economy is now in recession, including in the UK, where we're in quite significant recession at the moment. And we do now finally have a roadmap to being able to put on weddings again. The next stage for the UK is the 17th of May, when weddings of up to 30 people will be allowed. And then after the 21st of June, it's a bit unknown what will happen, but apparently weddings will then be back to normal. But realistically, I think it's safe to say that even from the 21st of June, there will still be some restrictions in place. And so anyone involved in the wedding industry will still need to think about social distancing, capacities of venues, whether masks need to be worn, health and safety with regard to hand sanitizer and keeping venues clean. So realistically, those kind of restrictions are going to be with us beyond the 21st of June and probably for a while longer. So I do want to acknowledge the economic impact of COVID, and I just want to mention this as well to say that some people like to say that sustainability should be a lower priority now because the industry does have to recover. But I go back to what I said earlier. Weddings should be joyous occasions, and it's a real opportunity to rip up the rule book and be creative with how weddings are run, so that we can run weddings in a way that are both COVID safe, financially viable, and environmentally sustainable. This is just to acknowledge again some of the impacts of COVID on weddings. So on the one hand, you might be trying to reduce the amount of private cars for weddings, but on the other hand, people feel safer in private cars. And so there are some impacts from COVID that will negatively affect the kind of sustainability initiatives you're trying to put in place. So just be mindful of that. Socially distanced micro weddings is another issue with COVID. So again, this may reduce the financial viability of your weddings and something to be considered, but it doesn't mean that your weddings can't be sustainable. So sustainable weddings, how do we do that? And how do we bring our supply chain up to where we need it to be so that we can do that? The way we do it at Legacy is we have come up with 9 themes of sustainability that we use to decide how to reduce our environmental impacts and make our events more sustainable. I'll run through them quickly now, and these are on the Legacy website as well if you want to take a look at legacy-events/sustainability. So our first theme is energy and carbon, and we say that's the first theme because climate change, according to the UN, is the biggest problem that humanity is facing. And so we feel that climate change and reducing your energy use and your carbon footprint should be your #1 priority when considering a sustainable wedding. So we think that you should consider energy and carbon in everything you do to try and deliver low carbon events that show how we're increasing to a world that's affected by climate change. Our second priority theme is materials and correspondingly waste. And this is always the most visible impact of a wedding. So we think that this should be your #2 priority, supporting the waste hierarchy, reducing and reusing materials where you can, recycling where you can, to really show that sustainability is a consideration. And the third theme we look at is food and drink, so important for weddings. We consider 2 issues with food and drink. First of all, we want our food to be healthy and nourishment, so we want to limit junk food. And second of all, we want it to be environmentally sustainable as well, so high welfare food that can be traced through the food chain and that does not lead to a higher carbon footprint. We also look at well-being, which is often forgotten as a sustainability theme, but of course it is. The well-being of the people at your wedding and your crew and your staff is really important for a successful event, so we consider well-being of our guests as well. Water is also often forgotten, especially in the UK, because we have this misconception that we have plenty of water in the UK, whereas actually in the southeast we're completely water stressed. We don't have enough water in the southeast, and so conserving water really is an important issue for sustainability in the UK even, and especially if you work abroad. And then transport is another major theme for wedding. It's unavoidable that to hold a wedding you're bringing people from often around the country, sometimes internationally, to one place, and that has a huge carbon footprint. So you really want to consider transport to try and reduce the impact that you're having. The other 3 themes are probably lower in importance for weddings: community, innovation and ecology, but still important, as I'll come to show. So why is change needed? I think Greta Thunberg is really quite articulate in the way she sums this up, and she says that everyone keeps saying that climate change is an existential threat, but they're not really doing anything about it. So as I mentioned, there's plenty of research on this, I won't dwell on it, but climate change is a huge threat and we really need to be reducing our carbon footprint so we can battle it. This picture was taken 2 years ago. It's a sperm whale that washed up on a Scottish beach, and the thinking is that it starved to death because of the amount of plastic in its stomach. So waste is the other massive environmental issue we're facing all around the world, for lots of reasons. One reason is that we don't really have capacity to deal with plastic waste. We don't have enough landfill space to deal with the amount of plastic that we're generating, and so we really need to stop generating plastic because we've got nowhere to put it. And second of all, this issue that the picture shows, that it's really quite damaging to wildlife as well. So what can we do with our supply chain to try and limit our carbon footprint, to reduce our waste and work on all those themes I've just presented? And the first one, I can say, the most important one, because your venue really is the most important aspect of your sustainability journey, is to work with your venue to try and come together on your journey and be more sustainable. And when I say work with your venue, there's lots of ways you can do that. As I mentioned, climate change and waste are the 2 major issues that we're concerned about. And the way a venue contributes to climate change is generally through its heating and its lighting and its power. So you want to work with your venue to reduce its heating, lighting and power. So one way you can do that is work with venues that use renewable energy, so they use less energy, or green energy, And that doesn't mean, again, you have to have a barn in the middle of a field with lots of space for solar panels. There are many, many venues in city centres that have solar panels. This is a picture from the My Brighton Hotel, which is powered quite substantially by solar power. Really simple one with working with your venue. Just turn the lights off. As I mentioned, generating electricity using power is a major part of your carbon footprint. So if you work with venues that are enlightened and will help you with these kind of issues, it will really go a long way to reducing your carbon footprint. So just turn off the lights, turn off any equipment that's not in use when it's not needed, and that will help to reduce your carbon footprint. Waste is a major issue, especially at weddings, because inherently they are one-time events, and so they generate a lot of waste used with items that are never used again. So you want to follow the waste hierarchy, and this starts with reducing the amount of waste and then finishes with recycling. So what that means practically is in your supply chain, don't go straight to thinking, what can I recycle? First of all, you want to be thinking about what can you reduce? How can I have less or fewer items for this wedding? And so in terms of mindset, what that means is maybe thinking a different way. Instead of over catering or over ordering because you're worried you might not have enough stuff, you need to go back to your planning and think, okay, how can I order or purchase just the right amount of items I need so that I don't waste anything afterwards? And how can I use the venue's own cutlery, for example, or crockery so that I don't have to bring in my own paper plates that then have to be disposed of? So think about reduction first before you then start thinking about recycling. COVID and sustainability are a really great time for you to finally think about things like wedding favours and other items that tend to go straight into the bin after the event. So think about favours that you're providing for guests, bits of paper that you're providing for guests, anything that a guest might use for a few minutes and then not really look at it again. It's an opportunity to get rid of that kind of thing and go and to be more sustainable. And this starts from the actual day, but also with the wedding party as well. I'm sure you all know that bridesmaids and best men are notorious for being given one-time gifts that aren't really used afterwards. So really be creative in how you can make the bridal party feel special and loved without giving them items that do tend to go straight in the bin. Catering, so important for all events and especially for weddings. And catering can be a bit political as well within families and with your clients as well, who will only eat certain types of food. There's a misconception at the moment that eating local is what you want to do for a better carbon footprint, and that's simply not true. I'm not sure if you can see the numbers on this graph, but basically it shows that what you eat is more important than where it comes from. So the worst food you can eat in terms of your carbon footprint are red meats, so beef, lamb and mutton, followed by cheese, chocolate, foods that come from red meats. And that's because of all kinds of reasons, but mainly the land that's used for grazing and also just the effect that their body processes have in the environment. So if you're not quite ready to go vegan for your guests, and a lot of people aren't, you can at least reduce the amount of beef and lamb that you're serving at your wedding and work with your supply chain to do that, and that will help with making your wedding more sustainable. The best option is completely plant-based or vegan, but I completely understand not everyone is ready to do that yet. Just to kind of reiterate that point, this shows the difference in carbon footprint from having a typical wedding meal that contains a lot of beef, for example, versus a vegan one. So you can see you can shrink your footprint by more than half if you serve a vegan meal compared to one that has red meat. Decor is a huge part of weddings, the flowers, the plants. I'm sure this isn't a surprise to anyone watching that can be massively unsustainable. Shipping or often flying fresh flowers from other countries has a huge carbon footprint. It's damaging to the environment. And so where you can, try and think of alternatives to fresh flowers, especially fresh flowers that are not seasonal or native. So one option for that is using dried vegetation. You can see here that this stunning display is as attractive as a fresh flower display, but with a fraction of the carbon footprint. Also think about using artificial vegetation. Silk flowers have really come on. They look fantastic now and they can be reused. And again, they have a fraction of the carbon footprint of fresh flowers, especially those that are coming from other places. And then keep it local, and by this I mean use local suppliers where you can. Try not to use big companies. Just think about the in your supply chain using smaller companies that would really benefit from the injection of cash that you're giving to that local economy. Some of the positive impacts now of COVID, I mentioned some of the negative ones before, but some of the positive ones is that now you can do a lot of virtual tours of venues. And so that means you don't always have to travel to the venue itself to see what its features are and what its advantages are. So try and limit the visits that you do to venues and use virtual tours, and encourage the venues to put up virtual tours where you can, so that you don't have to increase your carbon footprint by traveling to them. And as I said, be creative with what you do. Sustainability doesn't have to be restrictive, it doesn't have to be boring, it doesn't have to be brown. It's a real opportunity for you to think about the weddings that you're organising and be creative in how you do that. And finally, avoid greenwash, which is inevitable. There's a lot of fluffy language in the wedding industry, especially around sustainability and eco-friendly weddings. So just make sure you understand what your suppliers are telling you. And there's no harm in asking questions to clarify some of their claims. So don't just take everything you're told as read. Try and be informed about the products and the suppliers that you're using. So that's a little bit about making your supply chain for weddings more sustainable. Please do stay in touch. Here's a little bit about what Legacy does. Like I said, we organise events, we have a marketplace, we have a forum, and on our forum, we have a space specifically for people organising weddings to ask questions of other event planners, anything that to do with sustainability. It's free to use, it's free to sign up. So please do sign up to the forum and continue the conversation on there. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks so much, Abina. Really, really useful. As always, Abina's going to be joining us with Q&A, so please jump over and let her know if you've got any questions, and we'll see you again for the next session shortly. Joining us next is Kate. Kate is the founder of Bridal Reloved, and she's going to be talking to us about her sustainable journey over the last 8 years since she founded Bridal Reloved. Since founding it, they now have 20 stores nationwide and have learnt an awful lot about what it takes to be a sustainable business. She's going to share with us her knowledge and also the hiccups that she has had over the way, helping us to avoid making the same one. Kate, over to you.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this journey with you. We're really honoured to be able to take part and have a voice. So I'm going to talk obviously about how to make your business more sustainable. I'm going to talk a little bit about my business and how we're working as a sustainable company. So for those that don't know, we're Bridal Reloved, and we've been around for 8 years now. We started in 2013, and we started this business because I had a wedding dress to sell and nowhere local to sell it to me in Yorkshire. So what I did is I did a bit of research online, and there are a couple of stores down south that operated as a dress agent that would take a pre-owned wedding dress, second-hand wedding dress if you think, but they weren't taking any in. They were full to capacity, and I thought, well, there must be lots of people with dresses from their weddings that they don't know what to do with, because obviously the agents that I found were full to capacity. So I didn't want to keep my gown. I had no storage for it. It was a lot of money. My mum bought me my dress, and it was beautiful, and it was 4 years old at the time, and I didn't want to keep it and just not do anything with it. So I had no crafty skills at that time. I do now, but I didn't then. So repurposing it wasn't really an option. I wouldn't have known where to start. So at the time I was in between some freelance contracts, and I thought, well, there's nowhere to sell this dress. I might as well make somewhere to sell it. So kind of 8 weeks later, I opened Bridal We Loved in East Yorkshire in Beverley, and started the first store. And instantly, with so many more like-minded people like me, people kept coming to us with dresses to sell. They've got one that they bought two, or they've got one that they never wore for sad reasons, or they've got one that's been sat in a box under the bed or in the attic taking up room at the mum's house, which a lot of them are. And people wanted to do things with their dresses, so one of the ways that we could help was sell them on. And we had an audience of people that wanted to buy pre-owned, or people that had a slight budget, that they wanted a really decent dress but just couldn't afford to pay for a full price dress. So we seem to have a market for it, both coming in and going out. As the years went on, we evolved, obviously, and we duplicated, and then we franchised, and we had more like-minded business people that were the same as me, that wanted to open a business selling really, really good quality gowns, onto people. And the best thing about, that is we were ending up, spreading the word, growing the brand, and, trying to and fill in gaps in many markets across the UK. As time went on as well, we were approached by designers, and we approached some designers as well, who have a lot of sample stock, discontinued stock, surplus stock, and also dresses that they design, and then they're their kind of like their cutting room dress, where they come up with a creative idea, but they don't sell that dress. But again, it gets stuck in a studio's archive, really, and it just withers away. So we had access to so many dresses. So because there are so many made, there are so many designers all bringing out hundreds of collections and seasons across the globe, that there's just masses and masses of dresses. So we really just we're inundated, to be honest with you. We have currently 20 stores, but I could probably open 60 stores and still have too many dresses, because there's just so many made, and it's fast fashion if you think about it. Over the years, it became apparent to me that there was a problem with the industry in bridal. A couple of problems, to be honest with you. One is the problem of production, the mass made and the fabrics that they're made, and the other problem is the sheer amount that's made. And the other problem is that it's made to just be worn once. It's the most expensive, one of the most expensive items, with the most fabric that anybody will buy for one day, and then they have no reason to wear it again, or no skills to do anything else with it. So yeah, it's interesting to see how all these gowns that are out there, many of them end up in landfill. That's like ultimately the end of the day. That's where they end up, after either many years sat in archives or many years sat in people's lofts. When you move house, we get loads of people getting in touch with us saying they've moved house recently and found a dress in their attic. Sometimes they've been amazing vintage Vera Wangs, but sometimes they've been some puffballs from the 80s that we couldn't sell. We probably could sell them now, because puffballs back in again, as fashion and trends tend to do. But the majority of them were just a little bit too dated. But it's meters and meters of fabric, sometimes 20, 30 meters of fabric. Layers upon layers. You've not just got one layer of 10 meters, you've got potentially 4 or 5 layers in a wedding dress. So there's so much fabric. So the average wedding dress is the length of a double-decker bus. And some have 2 or 3 double-decker buses. It's just crazy the amount of fabric are in these gowns to be worn once, and then what happens with them? It's a bit. It's just a massive grey area that kind of I feel that nobody talks about in bridal fashion industry. It's great. We've got lots of designers these days that are starting to design dresses more ethically and more sustainably with their fabrics, but there's still many companies out there that are mass producing synthetic materials, you know, and they take years, a couple of 100 years to biodegrade, releasing, you know, harmful gases at the same time. So, you know, the new companies that are coming up, or not necessarily new, some of them are you know, designers that have new ways of thinking, are just producing gowns more ethically and more sustainably. So there is that option out there. Fashion is important. I'm not disputing that. Fashion is incredibly important to civilization. You know, clothes have a purpose. They can make people feel that they've got a purpose. They're seasonal because we have seasons. We need clothes to keep us warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Obviously, you know, fashion it gives people their identity. You can choose what you wear, and it's a way of, you know, communicating. So yeah, fashion's really important, but at the same time, you know, so much fast fashion out there. It's thinking of ways to slow it down, and that's ultimately what Bridal Love's trying to do. We're trying to slow down that part of the industry and give that garment a longer life through, you know, exploration, repurposing, reselling, trying to encourage people to recycle, reuse. If you know, there are many different options available to you. If you don't want to buy you know, don't feel that if you don't buy a pre-owned dress, you're not being sustainable. You can buy a dress, but think about what you're going to do with it afterwards. So it's that thinking about, it's being conscious, and that's one of the biggest messages that people are just constantly trying to talk about when they're in you know, this sustainable mindset. That it's being conscious and it's thinking about things. So if you're buying a brand new wedding dress and you know that you're only going to use it once, already have a plan in place for what you want to do afterwards. You could get it framed and use it as a bit of artwork. You could cut it up and make it into nightgowns, summer dress. You could, with one garment, we've got the Bridal Love challenge at the moment. With one garment, you could see how many things you could make out of it. Tote bags, masks. You could make loads of things. Cushions for your spare room, a throw for your own bed, something for your children's room. Use that fabric. You paid a lot of money and you've got all this fabric and you have these beautiful pictures of you in this gown, and you know, you're probably never going to use that dress again. Your daughter probably won't want to wear it when she grows up. She might want her own dress, and it's, you know, the ideas are in place, but you know, it's thinking about what you want to do afterwards. So there are choices. What works well for you doesn't necessarily work well for everybody else. At the time, I didn't know how to repurpose a gown, so I sold it. Would I have bought a pre-owned gown if I had the opportunity? I don't really know, to be honest with you, because I was never presented with the opportunity at the time. It's not something I thought about. And that was 12 years ago. It just didn't cross my mind, wedding dress shopping. But it was very apparent to me a few years later that I have this gown, what am I going to do with it? Gosh, that was a lot of money. What a lot of fabric. And you question that afterwards. You don't do that before the wedding in most cases. But you know, hopefully now there's lots more people that are considering those questions before they're paying for an item. So really, our purpose at Bridal Loved is to slow down that, slow down the fashion, slow down that the life of that one item. Really, it was made for one reason. It was made for, you know, it has one sole purpose, to be worn on one day. So it's just a shame not to do anything with all that fabric. It's important to know the, you know, what to do with gowns. It's important to know what to do, you know, to have a more sustainable wedding, because weddings, your carbon footprint of the wedding for one day can match that of yours for the whole year. So 365 days crammed into one day. So whilst your wedding could impact that on the planet, you could potentially be making better decisions to lower that, or better decisions throughout the year to reduce that impact in your everyday normal lives, as opposed to being wedding life and bride and grooms. So yeah, it's constantly thinking about ways to it's being conscious, isn't it, all the time? It's thinking about things and exploring ideas, and that's my best advice really to couples planning weddings, my friends in everyday life, to businesses as well that are trying to be more conscious and more ethical or more sustainable. It's just small steps, and just take that time to consider things that we do. Obviously, we have a really sustainable business because we recycle the fabrics and the dresses that we were just talking about. But the other things that we do in our business that are really small steps just to help. And we're only human. Not all the time can we keep it up, but we do try. And it's that conscious. Don't feel bad if you can't fulfill it. You just small steps, or just take you on a longer journey, really. So, I mean, other things you can do in your business is have a walk around one morning with the staff and say, what could we do better? And we did that at the time, and we realised, obviously, because the industry we work in, we don't really have a lot. We only sell like one wedding dress, veils and tiaras, so we don't have a lot of product. We just have kind of 3 products. So whilst we don't have a mass amount of areas to consider, we did look at our dress bags that were once plastic, and now they're breathable, biodegradable fabric bags. So in 10-20 years time, it's going to disintegrate anyway, so you might want to think about you're doing something with your dress before that time. And then walking around our receipts folder, we just thought, why are we printing all these receipts? We've got we don't need them. We don't need these invoices in the file. We've got them electronically, sorry. We send them to our customers electronically, so let's stop printing them. Our milk, we don't really have much in our fridge apart from Prosecco and milk. Sounds quite good, actually. But we have our milk cartons, and we realised we went through sort of 10-20 big litre milk cartons a month. And then we started buying our milk locally. There's a couple of great places near us down here in Dorset where you can buy your milk bottles and refill them. So that's made a massive impact. What else have we done recently? We get lots of coat hangers, obviously. So we only order wooden coat hangers, and we only use wooden coat hangers. But when we get given dresses or sent dresses, often they come on plastic coat hangers. And we don't really want to give them out, but we don't want to not do anything with them because it's repurposing. So we just pop a little note on Facebook and to our local audience and say, does anyone want a bag of coat hangers? Everybody needs coat hangers. And somebody will come and pick them up, and that's us passed their coat hangers on, so they're not being thrown away and they're going to get reused. The same with our paper, and we do shredding. We've got a local florist that takes our shredding from us a couple of times a year because she's got chickens and pets, and she uses it as bedding. So we know that it's going to get reused and going to get passed on, and it's just really little steps. We're not changing the world in one day with these little steps that we're making, but it's a contribution that your company can kind of start thinking about as you take on this journey of trying to work at a different kind of mindset. So yeah, there's always many different options to investigate. Other things that your company can be doing to be more conscious is donate, as I've mentioned previously, but you could also think about education. So your promotion, this helps with your social media as well. This is content to talk about. So 2 birds, 1 stone, really. But you could educate your customers. So like I explained earlier, we educate our customers by recommending things to do with their dresses after their wedding. So if you sell candles and you've got the jars, you could encourage people to reuse the jars afterwards, clean them out and use them for plant pots, or use them for cooking, or the drinks glasses. There's all kinds of things that you can be doing to educate your customers into not necessarily just throwing something out. And as I mentioned before, it's those small steps that, you know, not everybody's going to be completely 100% zero waste by the end of the week. It is a process, but I think the most important message really is just keep making those small steps and those decisions, and more will add up. And eventually, one day you might turn around and think your business is zero waste. We'd love to get to that point. Other things you can do are check out who you're buying from or working with. And again, this is for brides and grooms, and this is for also, you know, your stockists and companies. Have a look at them, see how eco-friendly they are. You might decide to, you might not agree with their principles. You might decide to keep shopping around until you find something that is in line with your own values. Other things you can definitely do is go to litter picking, beach clean days, organise it with your friends or organise it with your teammates or workmates. It is incredibly, whilst you're doing something good for the planet, it's also so many other benefits for your own health and your own mental health and your own, team building. When you've done something good like that, it's a win-win situation all round, really. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to talk. And we hope to, hear some of your ideas and see some of your decisions come to light more and more as you plan your weddings or as you go to work or live your daily life. So thank you, Michelle, for this opportunity. We've really enjoyed being here today.
Kate, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing such valuable insights into your journey. So all that remains for me to say is a massive, massive thank you to all the speakers for joining us here today. It's been such a privilege to hear from them all, and I think you'll agree, we have all learned a massive amount, and I'm so excited about the future of the Alliance. Before I go, I just want to share with you some of the key statistics that have come out of the survey that we have been running for just over a month now. The survey is still open, so if you want to go on and let us know what you think about sustainability in the industry, or pass it on to your couples and find out what they think, you'd be more than welcome to. We'll drop the link below in the notes, and so that you can share it with whoever you'd like to. So at the moment, as of today, the statistics I'd like to share with you are really about what the clients, the couples that we work with, and their views of sustainability. 80% of the couples we spoke to told us that sustainability was really important to them, that it was part of their day-to-day lives. 68% of businesses thought that it wasn't very high on the agenda for our couples, but we know that 58% have ranked it higher and told us that it's important or very important to them. And an additional 35% said that although it wasn't top of their list, it was something that they were making sure that they were considering during their planning, which tells us that 93% of couples have got sustainability at the forefront of their minds when planning their wedding, which is an absolutely amazing statistic and shows us as wedding suppliers that we need to make sure that we're meeting that demand. We also asked them whether or not it was important for the businesses to have some form of sustainability credentials, and over 52% said it was. So, if you have had your interest piqued today and you are wanting to find out more about what you can do to make your business more sustainable, please drop us a line, give us a call. We would really, really love to talk to you. As you know, membership is opening next week, and we would absolutely love to hear from people that want to make their business more sustainable. Thanks very much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Sustainable Wedding Summit.